The Unseen Visitor. In the late 90s, I had an experience at my brother's house that would linger with me for years to come. It was a cold, late winter evening just before early spring, with a hint of cloudy gloom that was hanging in the air. The temperature was not freezing, but it was cold enough to chill your bones. I came into town from a 2-hour drive to go to dinner with my brother Douglas and his wife Kim, and I was going to stay over for the night. When I arrived, Kim wasn't home yet from visiting her mother across town, so we were waiting for her to return home. The house, a small wood frame cottage built in the 1940s, had been refurbished by my brother, and Kim, his wife, kept everything crystal clean and smelling fresh with scented candles and air fresheners, but the creaky wooden floors and the heavy solid front door still held on to the history of the past from the sounds they made. The house had character and lots of charm. Despite its charm, there was something about the neighborhood that screamed of age and mystery. The house sat just one street away from a lake. It was surrounded by ancient, tall cypress trees, their gnarled branches casting long shadows and giving the area a haunting atmosphere, especially when the sun began to set. While we were waiting for Kim, Douglas wanted to take his large golden retriever, Samson, outside for a few minutes, and he told me to go ahead and set my bags in the spare room. He used the spare room as a home office, and since he had a computer in there, I decided to check my emails and messages while I waited. As I sat at his desk, waiting for my messages to load on screen, I noticed the air in the room felt thick, and there was an unusual silence, except for the sound of the oil furnace groaning in the background, trying to warm the house against the chill. Suddenly, a noise cut through the quiet. The echoing sound of a heavy wooden door opening and then slamming shut. It was followed by the unmistakable sound of heels clicking across the floor. The house was always noisy. Those old floors creaked and groaned with every movement, but this sound was different. The footsteps were purposeful and slow, but steady, as if someone was walking through the house. I didn't think much of it at first because I assumed it was my sister-in-law finally returning home. Knowing it would soon be time to go, I was rushing through my messages. The footsteps came towards me and suddenly stopped at the doorway of the room I was in, and I felt like I was being glared at. I glanced up from the screen, just enough to see a woman standing in the doorway. I actually didn't look all the way up, and I never saw her face. I just glanced towards the floor and saw what was obvious in my mind as a woman. I noticed dress pants, high heels, and shopping bags at her side. I could hear the faint rustle of the bags as she shifted her weight slightly, but something felt off. Something in the way she stood there without speaking. I ignored the feeling, and being distracted by my emails, I quickly said, "I'll be done here in just a moment. Douglas is outside with Sampson, but we are ready to go to dinner." She didn't respond. She turned and walked across the hall towards Douglas and Kim's bedroom, with the sound of her heels fading as she went. I thought nothing of it and returned my attention to the emails. Douglas came back inside with Sampson shortly after and stepped into the room where I was, his voice raised in mild surprise, asking, "Where's Kim? I don't understand why she's not here yet." I mentioned casually that Kim had in fact just come in the door and had gone to their room, but when Douglas checked, he was puzzled. He said to me, "No, she's not in there," while peering into the room. I stood up, insistent. "But I saw her." Well, I saw her pants, shoes, and shopping bags, because I didn't fully look at her. "She went into your bedroom." He told me I was mistaken because Kim was not out shopping. She had only gone for a short visit to her mom's house. He looked outside, scanning the driveway. "Her car isn't here," he said, his voice softening with a chuckle. "No, she's not home yet, and you've lost your mind." I described the woman I saw, and the sounds I heard from her entering the house and walking down the hallway. But as I did, the realization hit me. I felt a large lump in my throat, and my heart sunk in my chest. "It wasn't Kim?" I questioned with confusion. "That's impossible," I muttered to myself. My brother laughed softly, a knowing smile playing at the edges of his mouth. "You must have seen our ghost," he exclaimed. I paused, processing what he had just said. "Ghost? What ghost?" He went on to explain that the house had a history. The original owner, whom my brother knew, and his wife lived there for several decades. They were very happy there, and it was her happy place. He sold it after his wife passed away there, and the man had spoken often of her to my brother. He'd even joked with my brother, saying she was a shopaholic. My brother had lived there several years and never mentioned anything to me before about her ghost. Douglas went on to tell me that both he and his wife had seen her, often late at night or early in the morning, when their eyes were still heavy with sleep. They'd glimpsed her in passing, always in a hurry, but her never doing anything threatening. They believed Sampson had seen her too, often barking into empty rooms and corners as if he could see her clearly. She wasn't harmful, my brother assured me. "In fact, she has a kind of peaceful presence," he said, "and it's like she's here to watch over us rather than to frighten us." He did admit that although she was peaceful, she did like things just so in her house, and they had often woken to find their dresser items had been rearranged and Kim's jewelry placed in a different location on the dresser than she had left them. This was her home, and she loved it, and maybe she was even watching over her house. I stood there in stunned silence, unable to process everything. As the realization set in, my unease began to grow. I had just seen her. I had spoken to her. At least I thought I had. It wasn't my imagination playing tricks on me. I had experienced something that didn't belong in the realm of the living. I knew what I had seen, but I couldn't convince myself of the logical explanation. In the end, I couldn't shake the feelings of the chill up my spine and the coldness that lingered in my bones. The sudden weight of the house's history, its quiet whispers, and the presence of its past seemed too much to ignore. I knew I couldn't stay there another minute with what I had learned. I made apologies and canceled my dinner plans with them, and insisted I needed to go home. The gray, dreary sky outside mirrored my feelings as I packed my bags. My brother insisted that I was overreacting and pleaded with me to stay. As I was making the 2-hour trip back home late that night, the weight of the encounter was heavy on my mind. I couldn't help but think about the rustling of her shopping bags, the faint echoes of her heels tapping across the old wooden floors, and the cold, distant feeling of knowing I had been visited by a ghost who wasn't ready to let go of her home, and how comfortable they were living with her. As my headlights pierced through the dense darkness ahead, the road felt reassuring beneath my tires. Each mile I placed between myself and the house lifted the weight from my shoulders, yet the memories of whispers and footsteps clung stubbornly to me like mist. I knew then, deep in my bones, that some stories weren't meant to be solved, only respected and left quietly behind.